Welcome to episode 1 of the TechFocus podcast. I'm Aaron, I'm going to be your host, and we're going to talk about a few different things today. So, first of all, I'm going to tell you about what TechFocus is as a podcast and why I started it. We're then going to move on to talking about the A7C Mark II, which is rumoured to be coming out pretty soon. So we're going to talk about some of the rumours around that camera, the potential release date, and what is likely to be released. We're then going to talk about leaked images of the A7C Mark II, and don't worry, I'm going to be describing this in detail for any audio listeners as well. And then finally, we're going to talking about my kind of ideal wish list of features that aren't necessarily included in the rumours of, the A7C Mark II, and that's going to be as an existing A7C user. So, without further ado, let's crack on. So what is TechFocus and why did I start this podcast? I have a YouTube channel called Aaron Brown, which is my name, and it covers more kind of shorter forms, so 5 to 10 minute videos on tech and camera gear. So I want to kind of continue that theme on this podcast, but go into more of a deep dive onto different topics. I'm also not going to be doing as much editing on this podcast. I'm just going to have basic stuff. If I'm looking at something on my laptop, I'll be showing that. And otherwise, I'll just be kind of talking to the camera. So hopefully there should be a quicker turnaround of these podcast episodes than on my normal kind of video schedule, which is usually about once a month or at the most kind of every 2 weeks. I'm still kind of going to be going through a few teething issues in terms of trying to get this setup working properly. But once I get the workflow going, it should actually work, a lot faster. And there's a couple of reasons why I want to do this. And that's because, number one, I want to be able to comment on more recent things that are happening in tech news. So things like the release of a new camera that's upcoming, talking about that. And when the camera is finally released, the A7C Mark II, I want to actually talk about the camera itself and think about, which rumors were correct and what was going to be exciting about that camera and things like that, which I can't really do with my current channel because it takes me too long to edit things. So by the time I release the video, it would just be, not relevant anymore. So that's why this is here. The other thing is I want to kind of start more of a community in terms of podcasts, kind of give you more of a way to interact with me and for me to interact with you as the audience. And I'm really looking forward to that. That's part of the reason I enjoy making YouTube videos in the first place, is having that community, having those comments coming in and replying to them. So I want you guys to comment down below any comments you have about this podcast episode or going forward. Comment down below, and I would love to kind of meet you in the comments and have a good chat there. So without further ado, let's just crack on with the episode and talk about the A7C Mark II. There's a few things here. First of all, we're going to jump into this website, which is Sony Rumours, and you're probably familiar with it if you're interested in Sony gear at all, which you probably are, seeing as you clicked on this episode. We have rumours that there are 3 things coming out on August 29th. So the Sony A7C Mark II, the A7C-R, which is going to be a high-resolution version of the A7C, and the FE16-35mm f2.8 G Master 2 lens. I'm not massively interested in the lens because I'm probably not going to buy that. If you're interested in that, this probably isn't the podcast for you, so just letting you know that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the A7C-R, and we're going to mainly focus on the A7C Mark II. So first of all, the A7C Mark II, it's rumoured to obviously have a 33 megapixel sensor, which is the one that's taken from the Sony A7 IV. That is probably going to happen, almost certainly going to happen. And that kind of dictates some of the features that the A7C Mark II is going to have. Before we talk more about the A7C Mark II, we'll briefly talk about the A7C-R, because this is basically going to be a 61 megapixel version of the A7C. It's going to be more dictated or more geared towards photographers probably, who need a lot of resolution but also need a compact camera. And it's basically going to be taking features from the A7R Mark V, which is one of Sony's fairly recent cameras, which is an absolute beast because it's got a 63 megapixel sensor. It shoots 8K video up to 25 frames per second, and it's got brand new AI features as well for autofocusing and things like that, which make it an absolute beast of a camera. So that's going to be interesting. I'd be interested to see if with the A7C-R, they introduce 8K video, because I don't think the A7C body would be able to handle that kind of heat dissipation. And you'd probably only be able to shoot 8K for about 5 minutes before it overheated, to be honest. But it'd be interesting to see if they managed to put that in and they managed to deal with those heat issues. And that's kind of the main things I'm interested in with the A7C-R. I think also they might have a much better viewfinder as well for the A7C, because you'll need that if you're taking high resolution photos and you want to make sure everything's going to be in focus and looking correct. They're going to need to focus on that viewfinder and actually put a better viewfinder in there. So I'll be interested to see if they do that or if they stick with the same viewfinder. Okay, so moving on to the A7C Mark II, which is what I'm really more interested in because it's a more approachable, more accessible camera in my opinion. So let's jump on to this photo rumor site, which actually gives us some leaked pictures online of the A7C Mark II, as well as some rumored specs. So there's three different pictures here. There's one of the very top of the camera with showing kind of like the A7C II branding on the left-hand side, as well as some a new mode dial. Apart from that, the kind of body looks fairly similar to the A7C, the existing A7C. So if you have one of them, and there's also a custom button next to the menu button where the A7C already has the menu button, but it doesn't. The existing A7C doesn't have that custom button, so that's a brand new custom button. We've got another picture of kind of the top side of the camera, but you can see a bit more of the back of the camera as well. You can't see a lot here, but basically the back of the camera basically looks exactly the same from what I can see to the A7C, apart from that C1 custom button next to the menu button. And then we've got a third picture, which is basically the top view from the front of the camera. The front of the camera looks fairly similar as well. The only added thing here is a front dial for your forefinger, which is great. So going from the top there, we're going to break this down. First of all, we have this mode dial. And this is going to be a bit of a game changer in my opinion. I think this is going to be extremely useful because it's going to allow you to switch between your photo and video settings, and you're going to have separate settings for photo and video. This is something that really annoyed me about the A7C because you can't have separate settings for photo and video. So when you switch to video, switch to photo, sorry, it will still be an S-Log3. It will still have your 1/50th of a second shutter speed. It'll still have your custom white balance that you've set for your video. And you have to change all of that before you can start taking that photo of whatever you want to take a photo of. So if you've previously been shooting video in a studio and you want to go and shoot a photo, but you haven't set up your camera yet, when you get to that photo opportunity, you have to then change all of your settings before you can then take that photo. And that could cause you to miss that photo, which is not ideal. So this is a really welcome addition, and it looks like a really nice implementation. Basically, you've got the dial on top, and you've got a smaller dial at the bottom, or a switch at the bottom that allows you to switch between S and Q, video modes, and photo modes, which is great. If we scroll down, I've got this second picture here, which actually shows us more of the EVF, which looks exactly the same physically as the A7C. One thing I'm kind of disappointed about with this is the fact that you don't get a removable eye cup like you do with the A6700. So for example, if I go to this the product page for the A6700, you can clearly see there is an eye cup that you can actually detach from the body itself. So you could actually use the A6700 like the A7C's viewfinder. But if I go to another picture of the A6700, sorry, you can see from the top-down view here that you can actually use it without the eye cup, as in this picture, it doesn't have the eye cup. And the eye cup, this is very minor, but one of the problems with the A7C is that it doesn't actually isolate the light from your eye when you're looking through it. So if it's a really bright day, it's quite difficult to see the viewfinder in some cases. If that hasn't been a massive issue for me, but it would just be nice to have the option to put an eye cup on there or take the eye cup off if you didn't want to use it. So just something that's minor there. It says here that they expect it to be a 2.36 million dot EVF, which I'm pretty sure is exactly the same as the existing A7C, which is not unsurprising, but also quite disappointing because the existing EVF for the A7C isn't that great, in my opinion. It could have been improved, and they've obviously not prioritized that. They've prioritized other features, which is fair enough, kind of. But at the same time, I'd love to see an improved EVF on this camera. So there's still a chance it could be, but I'm not really expecting that to happen. The next thing here we have is the front dial, which is not there on the A7C. On the A7C Mark II, you're going to have a front dial, which is going to be excellent because that gives you full functionality of switching between your settings of the full exposure triangle. So ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. Currently on the A7C, because you don't have that, you have the ability to obviously change your aperture and your shutter speed quite easily with the dials. But then when it comes to ISO, you have to press a button. Then you can use the very back dial on the camera to actually change the ISO. So not great, but you do have the kind of option there. Like I said, the full back looks kind of pretty much the same. Last thing here, in terms of the custom buttons, like we said, there's a custom button next to the menu button. It's labeled C1. So I imagine you'll have the C1 and you'll have C2, which is next to the trash can or bin icon on the back at the bottom of the camera. But I'm not sure if you're going to have a custom button on the side of the camera, on the right side of the camera as well. Because in these photos, you can't see any part of the side of the camera to see if there's a custom button there. You do get a custom button like that on the A6700, so that's why I'm, speculating that could be a thing. There's a side view of the A6700, and you can see there's a C1 button on that side of the camera. So that would be a really perfect place to put another custom button on the A7C Mark II. I'm not sure if it's going to be there, but there's also in the leaked image, it looks like there's a little bit of a lip here, which I don't think was on the A7C. So there is a possibility we could get another custom button there. Like C2 could be there, and then C3 could be the trash can, and that would be a massively welcome addition. So we'll have to wait and see there. Going through the specs that are listed on here, we have the 33 megapixel sensor, which is the same as the A7 IV, which we already covered, which I'm expecting will be correct. We're going to have the Bion's XR processor, which is also expected, the same processor that's in all of Sony's newer cameras, and the AI processor as well, which is going to give you that AI autofocus features, such as when a person changes, turns around, you'll be able to focus on the back of their head until they turn back around to face you, and you'll be able to focus back on their eyes, which is a great feature. It will allow you to track subjects even if they're not facing you, which is going to be excellent. So a massively welcome addition to the A7C Mark II. We're going to have 5 stops of IBIS, probably going to be the same IBIS as was in the A7C because of the space limitation of the A7C, so I wouldn't be surprised if it is exactly the same system. It wasn't 100% great on the A7C. It was a little bit jittery in my experience. I'm really hoping they include some sort of active stabilization within the A7C Mark II, because if they don't, then you don't really have an option to get some super stabilized footage, apart from if you use like Catalyst Browse to use the gyro data to actually stabilize the footage in post, and that takes ages, in my opinion, if you're trying to do that for all of your footage. If you can use active stabilization and get the footage you want in camera, that's going to make a massive difference. So we'll see what happens with the IBIS, but I'm hoping they improve that in terms of adding the digital active stabilization to that as an option. So you're also going to have 10 frames per second burst, which is the same on the A7C. In my opinion, that doesn't really affect me. I'm quite happy with that. You're going to have 100 to 51,200 ISO range. You're going to have 10-bit 4K 60p and S-Cinetone as well. So let's break that down. So 10-bit is going to be amazing because the A7C currently only has 8-bit and supports 8-bit. And this means that you can't really do any sort of heavy color grading on the A7C currently. It only tends to be, light color grades. If you go past that, the footage starts to fall apart, which is not ideal. So I'm hoping that the 10-bit footage in the A7C Mark II will be malleable, it'll be really good, and you'll be able to do some heavy color grades on that if you want to. The 4K 60p is going to be welcome. That's probably going to be with a crop, similar to what we have on the A7 IV. It would be unbelievable if they do it without a crop, but we will see what happens there. They're probably going to have a crop on there. And S-Cinetone is going to be really nice to just get some really nice colors out of the camera if you want to get some nice colors out of the camera. I'm looking forward to that as well. And then it's going to have 2.36 million dot EVF. We've spoken about that before. 3-inch LCD screen. I think it's going to be the same screen that was on the A7C. And the screen on the A7C was another point that I didn't really like about this camera, because it just wasn't very good in terms of, it wasn't necessarily the resolution. The resolution didn't bother me that much at all. It's more about the dynamic range and how it displays colors and things like that. In my experience, you got a completely different image out on the back of the screen as to what actually comes up when you exported your footage onto your computer, for example, and view it on a different screen. That's kind of what you get with a lot of screens, but it was quite drastically different on the A7C. So you would look like you were completely blowing out your highlights on the A7C, but when you put it onto your computer, your highlights were totally fine, and you'd actually underexposed the image like way too much. So it was, the dynamic range of the camera screen just wasn't that good. I'm hoping they improve that within the A7C Mark II, but we'll have to wait and see with that. The next thing they have is 759 AF points, so autofocus points. I can't remember if that's more or less than the existing A7C, but either way, the A7C's autofocus is already really good in my opinion, so this is going to have better autofocus, guaranteed. and it's just going to be insane. So that's not a moot point really, because it's going to be amazing. You're going to have lens breathing compensation as well, which is something that was brought in the A7 IV. This is basically software that, it's a software feature that basically crops in on your image so that it compensates for any lens breathing for that lens, which is a nice feature to have. Even if you don't want to use it, you've got the option to use it there, which is good. So yeah, so that's all the features that they've kind of rumored for the A7C Mark II. They're all pretty exciting features, I'd say. And we'll have to wait and see in terms of like improved screen, improved EVF and things like that, because I'd love for those rumors to be wrong in terms of what they're rumoring there about those things. Next, we're going to talk about things I'd actually like to see in the A7C Mark II that aren't actually included in the rumors here. And these are some are wishful thinking. I'm going to say that. Some just definitely aren't going to happen. But it would be nice to see. So although I'd like to see the same size body as the A7C, and it looks like we're going to get that from the leaked images, I would love to see a better improved grip on the A7C. I don't think it was bad in the first one. I just think it could be improved. And I think the grip on the A6700, for example, looks excellent. It looks like a much improved grip. If I show this photo on the screen just now, it's a much improved grip on the A6700. You've got a nice large grip, and I would love if they just extended the grip out a little bit on the A7C Mark II. Don't think they're going to do that, but it would have been nice to see, basically. Next thing I'd love to see, and that isn't included in the rumors already, is the ability to use the front light on the A7C as a tally light, like you can on the ZVE10 and other ZVE cameras. This is a really nice feature because it just allows you to see when you're recording a lot easier than the tiny little record icon that's on the A7C currently. You also have the option on the ZVE10 to have a recording border around your screen on the ZVE10, which is another feature that just allows you to see when you're recording or when you're not. And these are features, the software feature in terms of the border around the screen is something that could easily be brought into the A7C Mark II, and I think that probably will be. I'm not sure about the tally light on the front though, but that would be ideal if they could bring that in as well. So we'll just have to wait and see for that one. The next thing is that I'd love the ability to put your shutter down when you turn the camera off, or when you're changing lenses, for example. This is something you can do on the A7 IV, I think, and it's an optional thing. You can turn it on or off, and I think that's the way to go, because some people might not want to have their shutter down, so they might not want to ruin their shutter. There's a good chance you can break your shutter when you're doing that. If you're just quickly changing a lens, it can be all the difference between getting dust on your lens, your sensor, and not getting dust on your sensor. So that would be a really nice addition, something easily that Sony could probably implement. So love to see that. I'd also love to see an improved built-in microphone on the A7C. This is something that on the ZVE10 is really nice to have, because if you forget your microphone or whatever, for whatever reason, you can still get fairly decent audio through the ZVE10's microphone. Whereas on the A7C, because you haven't got like a wind muff and the actual microphone's not that great, you just end up with pretty rubbish audio, especially if you're outside. It's going to be just like wind everywhere, so it's not ideal. I'd love to see an improved microphone. Don't think that's going to happen, just because I think that's kind of limited to the ZV line of cameras in terms of their really nice 3-capsule directional microphones. So just don't see that happening, but it would be nice. The new menu system is basically a given at this point. So it's going to be nice to see a new menu system on the A7C Mark II. It's something that is just pretty needed, to be honest. The old menu system is old, that's it. It's not very functional, and I think the new menu system looks a lot better, especially the fact you can use the touchscreen to actually navigate it and all those kind of things. Next thing is double card slots. So I'd love to see double card slots in the A7C Mark II. I can't see it happening just because I think it's probably down to space limitations to not be able to have 2 card slots in there. It would be really nice though. I reckon the most we'll get is a hybrid kind of single CF Express Type A SD card slot hybrid, but I don't think we'll get dual card slots. There might be a chance there'll be dual card slots on the A7C-R, but I just don't think it'll be on the A7C Mark II. But it would be lovely to see that, just so you've got the redundant recording, for example. Finally, there's a couple of things I want to talk about in terms of the A7C Mark II versus the A6700 and the A7C Mark II versus the A7 IV. So for me, the A6700 is an excellent looking camera. It's really compelling. It has so many different features, and it's such a fully featured camera. It has 4K 120 frames per second, for example, and a nice 26 megapixel sensor for photos as well. So it's a really nice camera in my opinion, and it's going to be interesting to see how the A7C Mark II is received. When you have the A6700 in the line, the main, obviously, selling point for the A7C Mark II is going to be that full-frame sensor, but is it going to be worth £600 or £700 more for the A7C Mark II? Let me know what you think down below, because I'll be interested to hear what you think. But I think the A7C Mark II is going to be realistically probably about £2,100, £2,200. So the A6700 goes for about £1,449. So we're talking about £600, £700 more for the A7C Mark II. And in my opinion, it's not going to be worth that much more because it's coming out around the same time as the A6700 has come out. So I doubt it's going to have that many more features than the A6700. But I'd be super interested to hear what you guys think. I'm also interested to see how they set this apart from the A7 IV, because it's going to be a similar price, probably. Slightly less, probably. The A7C Mark II is going to be slightly less than the A7 IV. It's going to have AI features. It's going to have brand new features that the A7 IV doesn't have, probably. That's kind of what Sony do. They don't necessarily update their old cameras, but they introduce a load of new features into their new cameras. But I guess the main features that you have different here are the A7C Mark II is obviously going to be a more compact form factor. But that comes, and that means that your A7 IV is going to have better ergonomics. You're going to have a dual card slot on the A7 IV. I don't think you're going to get that on the A7C Mark II, like we said. You're going to have more custom buttons on the A7 IV and things like that. And you're going to have a better viewfinder on the A7 IV. So those are going to be the key differentiators between these two cameras. But the A7C Mark II just seems like a more compelling option to me based on these rumours. But we'll have to see what they actually release and how they differentiate the A7C Mark II from the A7 IV above those different features that I've mentioned. It's going to be interesting to see what they come out with. In an ideal world, there's some ridiculous things I'd love for the A7C, which aren't going to happen. I can basically guarantee that's not going to happen. Built-in ND filters would be unbelievable. These are things that are, built into the ZV-1, for example. It'd be lovely to see that. That's not going to happen. I can almost guarantee that's not going to happen. But just imagine how good your workflow would be if you could just turn on an ND filter in the camera. You didn't have to put it on the end of your lens, for example. That'd be great. 4K 120, unbelievable if the A7C Mark II had that, but again, it's just not going to have that. I just can't see it happening. Maybe the A7C Mark III will have 4K 120, maybe it'll be 8K by that point. I'd love to see 6K video out of the A7C Mark II, just even the ability to do it. I think Sony just wouldn't do that because, again, it'll be probably just too much for the camera to handle, and it's such a small body, there won't be the heat dissipation there. So those three things I'd love to see. It's probably not going to happen though. So that's basically the end of this episode. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing. I'd love to have you along for the next episode as well. And please hit the like button if you're on YouTube, hit the follow button if you're on Spotify or any other platforms that you can follow on. And if you can give me a 5-star rating, I'd love that as well, if you enjoyed the episode, obviously. Otherwise, please comment down below what you thought of this episode and your thoughts on the A7C Mark II versus like the A6700, the features that you're expecting the A7C Mark II. Are you going to be getting this camera? I'd love to hear what you think. But otherwise, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I'll catch you guys all in the next episode. Cheers!